My father once told my sister she was dead to him. And he meant it so completely that we didn't hear his voice again for 3 years. I need you to sit with that for a second, because by the end of this story, that same man was sitting on my couch, with tears running down his face, holding a crayon like it was the most precious thing anyone had ever handed him. My name is Danielle Ruiz. I'm 32. And what I'm about to tell you is the most painful chapter my family ever lived through, and somehow, also the most beautiful one. It started on a random Thursday night in November. I was curled up on my couch, grading essays, because back then, I taught 10th grade English, living by myself, in a cramped one-bedroom, about 35 minutes outside my parents' town. My phone rang. And it was my younger sister, Priya. The second I picked up and heard her breathing, I knew. You just know, don't you, when something in someone's voice has cracked open. Priya was 19. She'd always been the gentle one, the one who apologized when other people bumped into her, the one who bottled everything up until she simply couldn't anymore. And that night, she finally let it all spill out. She was 10 weeks pregnant. The father was a guy named Marcus, someone she'd been quietly dating for almost a year, a guy my parents had already decided they hated because he worked construction and grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, according to them. I told her to breathe. I told her it would be fine. I actually believed that, because I had no idea what my parents were capable of, until she told them that same night. I wasn't in the room, but Priya replayed it for me afterward, in this raw, exact detail that only comes from a moment that's been seared into you forever. She sat my parents down in our family living room, the one with the fireplace mantle covered in school photos, and she told them the truth. She was pregnant, and she was keeping the baby. My dad shot up out of his recliner so violently, it nearly tipped backward. He didn't ask a single question. He just started shouting things at her that I still can't bring myself to repeat out loud, even now, years later. He told her she wasn't his daughter anymore. And then my mother, the one I always thought was the soft place to land, stood up right next to him and screamed at Priya to get out. Not get out of our house. Just get out of my house. Like Priya had already ceased to exist to her, standing right there under all those framed pictures of birthdays and holidays. Priya showed up outside my apartment door a little before midnight. One duffel bag. Tear tracks dried into her cheeks, that kind of salty residue that only comes from crying for hours straight. She was wearing this thin little cardigan that had no business being outside in November. I opened the door, and I didn't say anything at all. I just grabbed her, and held on to her, right there in the hallway. She kept whispering "I'm sorry," over and over. And honestly, that's what wrecked me the most, because she hadn't done a single thing wrong. She was 19 years old, about to become a mother, and the two people who were supposed to love her unconditionally, had just tossed her out into the cold, like she was nothing to them. I called my parents the next morning. I'd rehearsed the whole thing in my head. Stayed calm. Kept my voice steady. But the moment my father answered, sounding bored, almost annoyed that I was even calling, every ounce of composure I'd prepared just evaporated. I told him what he did was unforgivable. I told him Priya was staying with me, and that she'd be okay, whether they were in her life or not. My mother grabbed the phone, and told me I was making a huge mistake, that I was rewarding bad behavior. I told her that loving your daughter through a pregnancy isn't rewarding anything, it's just love. She hung up on me. My dad never even said goodbye. And that was it. 3 years of dead silence. Priya lived with me through the rest of her pregnancy. Marcus, to his credit, actually stuck around. He tried, he showed up, he did the work. But about 7 months after the baby arrived, the relationship quietly fell apart anyway. No big blow-up, no bitterness, just two young people realizing they made better co-parents than partners. They named the baby Sophia. She had Priya's exact eyes, and this enormous, room-filling laugh that showed up practically from the day she was born. I watched my little sister transform into a mother right in front of me, and somewhere along the way, I became something like a second parent myself. For 3 years, the three of us built this whole little world together, inside that cramped apartment, small in square footage, but overflowing with something that felt real. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, my parents showed up at my door. I remember exactly what I was doing that Saturday afternoon, in late spring. Sophia had just woken up from her nap. She was 3 by then, chatting in full sentences, drawing suns on literally every scrap of paper in the house. Priya was in the kitchen making sandwiches, humming to herself the way she always did on lazy weekends. I opened the door thinking it was the mail carrier I'd been waiting on all day. Instead, my parents were standing there. My whole body went ice cold. My dad looked like he'd aged a decade. My mom had chopped her hair short. They were both dressed carefully, deliberately, like they'd planned this outfit before they even got in the car, for the 35-minute drive, to show up unannounced, after 3 years of nothing. My father spoke first. He said they'd done a lot of thinking. He said they missed us. My mom's eyes were already brimming with tears, before she got a full sentence out. I stood in that doorway, feeling nothing at all, for what felt like a full 10 seconds, this strange, hollow calm, like the air right before a storm rolls in. And then, I let them inside. I honestly couldn't tell you exactly why. Maybe because some part of you never fully stops hoping your parents will come back. Maybe because I wanted Priya to be the one who got to decide what happened next, not me. I called out for Priya, and I heard her footsteps stop dead in the kitchen. There was this long, heavy pause, before she finally stepped into the hallway, and the second she saw them, she froze solid. My mother took one look at her, and just started sobbing. My father stared straight down at the floor. And then Sophia came barreling out of the back bedroom, ran right past my parents, wrapped herself around Priya's leg, and looked up at these two total strangers with zero fear in her eyes, because nobody had ever given her a reason to be scared of anyone. She had never met them before in her life. To her, they were just two people standing in her hallway. My mother looked down at her, and completely froze. My father made this sound, somewhere between a gasp, and a word that never quite came out. Because Sophia looked exactly, unbelievably, like my father's late mother, our grandmother, who had passed away 5 years earlier, a woman both my parents had adored more than almost anyone on earth. Same eyes. Same little head tilt when she was curious. Same tiny dimple, right on the left side of her face. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was the kind of thing that reaches straight through time, and grabs you by the throat. My mother whispered, "How is this even possible?" to no one in particular. Just to the room itself. Priya didn't cry. She just stood there, and looked at our parents with this steadiness, this quiet strength that comes from 3 years of hard, deliberate work rebuilding yourself, without needing anyone's permission to feel whole. She scooped Sophia up onto her hip, and said, simply, that this was her daughter. That she'd raised her with love, with my help, and that Sophia was happy and healthy, and had never once gone without anything she needed. She told them she'd forgiven them a long time ago, not because they deserved it, but because carrying that kind of anger while raising a child was a weight she refused to keep hauling around. My father sat down on the couch and put his face in his hands. My mother just kept staring at Sophia, like she was trying to burn every detail into her memory before it disappeared. And after a long, heavy silence, my dad finally looked up and said he was sorry. Not the fast, easy kind of sorry. The kind that costs a person something to say. The kind that comes out cracked and slow, because you know full well that no words are ever going to fully cover what got lost. We didn't fix everything that day. Some things just don't get fixed. They just get carried a little differently after that. But Sophia climbed right up onto the couch next to my father, completely unprompted, grabbed a crayon off the side table, and held it out to him, like she was handing over a gift. His hands were shaking when he took it. And just like that, without anyone planning it, or saying it out loud, something started to heal. Priya turned out to be so much stronger than any of us ever gave her credit for. And Sophia, that little girl with her great-grandmother's exact eyes, ended up being the bridge none of us even knew we needed. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if it reminded you that even a shattered family can find its way back to each other, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because next week's story might be the exact thing someone in your life needs to hear.